Solo developer Matthias Linder hit upon a fascinating concept in his recent interview with Touch Arcade about Chained Echoes. He said, think of the old SNES and PSX era RPGs, add magic, add mechs, and think of these old games as you remember them, not as they actually were. And you've got Chained Echoes. As I played through the 30 or so hour campaign that Chained Echoes provides, I hadn't yet read these words, but that's exactly it. Chained Echoes feels like a memory of Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, and Xenogears, but with some strong adult writing and Matthias' own clearly sardonic wit. I have no doubt that some will be calling this a modern classic. Why? I'm Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp, and now let's find out. The tale begins with Glen and Killian. Glen is a famous pilot of these large mechs, a part of one of the three warring kingdoms, sent on what seems like a suicide mission to finally put an end to it. Brushing over details, things don't go to plan, and Glen is left carrying only memories and regret. The three kingdoms come to a peace treaty, and the story picks up again at the Festival of Peace, in the rather lavish Farnsport. But it's fair to say that not everyone is as pleased with the assumed peace, and in particular the way with which it was acquired. And thus your adventure begins. Throughout your journey, you'll take on the role of many different characters. There are often times where the story splits, allowing you to take control of any of three different groups. And some of the storytelling is simply excellent. The red-headed female thief is so well written. When you take control of her, you'll simply be going about your daily routine of robbing people blind. While excellent storytelling is front and center of Chained Echoes, Matthias doesn't waste words. Conversations are brief and to the point, but they're also well written. While tertiary characters within this world will also have things to say that tend to add to the lore of the game rather than simply being filler. Sure, there is some of that, but it will usually put a smile on your face, such as a wife berating her husband for fighting a monster and him swearing he'd never do it again, or another sending you off with her husband's sandwiches after he left without them to go to the mines, only to find that he did it on purpose because he absolutely cannot stand her cooking. Clearly inspired by Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, it carries a number of its own flares. While you control your character from the classic top-down perspective, with a map allowing fast travel between those areas visited, you'll also find an intriguing side quest system, which is more of a conflation of quests and achievements, things like killing 9 of a certain monster type. They'll unlock squares upon the grid, and if you get lines, you'll get bonuses. You can also claim rewards from these, such as cash and extra items, and special gear used for crafting. It's a really nice little touch. You've probably noticed just how fast the characters move around the world, and that's a theme for Chained Echoes. Everything about this is snappy, from the movement to the dialogue and even the leveling to some degree, not something you usually associate with a JRPG. Enemies roam the land and can be avoided or engaged. At face value, it's a turn-based combat system with a turn order shown in the corner, but with an interesting overdrive mechanic. Performing some attacks will raise this and others will lower it, with the order of the day being trying to stay within overdrive but not heading into the red where you'll be overheating and the enemies will have an advantage, doing more damage and attacking more often. It proves to be a surprisingly robust system, most noticeable when fighting more difficult enemies such as bosses. You cannot simply wail on them and hope you win. You'll have to carefully place your party members, bearing in mind what skills they've got, but also who they're partnered with, because you can in fact have 8 party members in a single fight, 4 on the screen, and you can rotate others in and out. The rotation won't cost you your turn, but it adds a nice bit of tactical nuance to the combat. It wasn't all perfect for me. I did find the difficulty could spike from time to time, with a little bit of an RNG factor. This can be overcome in a few ways. Firstly, simply trying again, as you can just start from the beginning of a fight, which then allows you to reshuffle your team, which was usually enough to overcome the enemy. Or, if you feel so inclined, you can actually change some of the accessibility options to tweak the overall difficulty of the experience. I didn't do that, but I probably should have done, as one boss fight took me around about 3 hours. With each unit having their own class, weapon, as well as abilities, you'll be decking them out in a variety of different weapons and gear. These can be gemmed with shards from crystals that you've found throughout the map. Combinations of these can create different effects, which when applied to weapons will give you certain buffs. The final point on combat is the buffing and debuffing. Throwing oil over an enemy, for example, will make them vulnerable to flame, with others, such as the ghosts, all but requiring you to simply look at the buffs and debuffs to defeat them. Trust me on this one, look at the buffs and debuffs with the ghosts. And the combat system is topped off with the ultra moves. Very much the limit breaks. Each character has a unique one, and they come with some lovely little animations. As you'd expect, leveling is intrinsic to the experience, with standard monsters netting you SP. These skill points go into each of the different skills that you've got and gradually level them up, but they also fill their own pool, and from that pool you can manually put points into specific areas. But, and I'm sure you'll be glad to hear this, it's really not about grinding, as your main skill points to unlock new abilities are tied to the boss fights or larger creatures. And on that note, you will find unique monsters around the world that are significantly harder, but are well worth the struggle. The maps are filled with hidden items to find, treasure hidden behind walls or at the top of traversable cliffs. And then you've got your sky armors. These mech-like suits can be used in combat, and while they're initially unlocked, you won't unlock them again for a good 10 hours or so. The controls are straightforward enough. There's really nothing of note in this regard. There's no need for a run button because the characters constantly sprint, and everything else is as you would expect. It's a really easy game to just pick up and play. Quests are explained and marked easily on the maps. Combat's very enjoyable, and I really loved the way the story expanded and quickly entered those grey areas that seem to be the hallmarks of the great RPGs, while still retaining its heart by giving time to the small, often forgotten moments, like time around the campfire with your friends. If you can push past some of the more difficult areas or use the included accessibility, Chained Echoes is a fantastic experience. Gameplay scores 19 out of 20. The controls also score 19 out of 20. Now, although Matthias was a solo developer on this project, he had several artists work on some of the backgrounds, and these are excellent. Often they'll include parallax scrolling. This gives the image a real sense of depth, but it's punctuated with vibrant colours, and all of this is offset with one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a while. Aside from the excellent backgrounds and some really nice monster designs, I was more underwhelmed by the characters themselves. Their designs are fine, but I wish they'd added in some animation frames. Someone actually mentioned this on our weekend video, and I couldn't agree more. Just a few frames of breathing animation, or the flow of the cloves, something, anything, so they weren't just completely static. It's made more unusual as it contrasts with the motion afforded to some of the creatures in the world. Now that being said, it's still a stunning looking game in my opinion. I did encounter one bug where my turn order entered the middle of the screen, but aside from that it runs well, load times were quick, I didn't have any crashes, and there are so many little details to discover in each town and city. That soundtrack by Eddie Marianacro is incredibly good, and fun fact, his surname actually means cheerful harmony, so there you go. Visuals and performance score 18 out of 20. Musically it's excellent, some of the soundtracks aren't quite as strong, and audio still scores 19 out of 20. Chained Echoes will set you back £22.99 or your regional equivalent, and as mentioned, will take around 30 hours for your first playthrough. There's a lot to love here, from the storyline to the gameplay, with that 60 frames per second 16-bit styling and great soundtrack. It's well worth the money being asked. I believe it's taken Matthias Linder 7 years of his life to bring it to us, and in my opinion they are 7 years very well spent. The value overall scores 19 out of 20. Chained Echoes is a clear labour of love, but one which has produced something genuinely special. It's an unmissable and intricate RPG that expertly walks the tightrope of familiar but fresh. It scores a SwitchUp score of 94%. Absolutely add this one to your list, and I hope you have a blast. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content. If you want to save 10% on any of your games, including this one if you're buying it digitally, use code SwitchUp over at switchup.gg. Thanks to our Patreons and members. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!